I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, prescription for your transformation. Real people, real conversations, and real success. Really glad to be back after a slight break because I was doing a lot of traveling, a lot of logistical challenges, if you will, that really didn't allow me to perform at the highest level. And in addition to that, I'm doing all this on my own. Haven't figured out how to get the most ideal assistant. Well, I got a great, candidate for that. I mean, I'm looking at her right now, but she's already there in Arizona. It's beautiful and amazing, Wendy. And so anyhow, so we're back full force once again. An incredible conversation is going to happen today. And it's all going to be by audio because this amazing guest of mine, a dear, dear friend of mine, is he has the technical difficulties. And interesting enough, Wendy, before I introduce our dear guest, he would be one of the last people I would think would ever have one of these challenges. But that's the funny thing about our technology today, because the technology today allows us to do things that we could never do before. And really, quite frankly, that's how I got to where I am today. I've been having all these great ideas, 17 years of medical training and 18 years in practice and coming up all these wonderful possibilities, but just didn't have that technology out there to make it all happen. And now recently with, Facebook, obviously, and this new integration with Blue Jeans, which is phenomenal. Now I can do what I really want to do and have this authentic conversation, a little drier, authentic conversation with Wendy and my dear friend, because it's really about those stories, those ideas, those voices that really will make a difference for all of us. And tapping into that genius of other people so that we have the tools and resources to tap into our own genius, tapping into that brain intelligence, tapping into that body intelligence, and also tapping into that energy intelligence so that you can really start crafting and designing the life that you desire. But we need those resources. And too often in the melee of information and chaos and crazy marketing, if you will, it's hard to kind of filter out, what's good stuff and what's not. But even worse, you just don't know where to start. You just don't know what you don't know. And that's the whole purpose of this platform. The platform to bring these amazing voices to this platform, like my dear friend Matthew Ray Scott of the Feed the Agency. Cool name. And I'm going to have him explain a little bit about the background of this incredible name. But really, it's all about our identity. An identity of a corporation, of an institution. How do we get to stand out from the rest so that we deliver that message that people need to hear so that they then realize that as a corporation or a company, whatever we are the ones that they're looking for. And this man, Matthew Ray Scott, is a genius at this. Matthew, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Rademaker and Wendy. I appreciate being a guest. I want to apologize in advance. As Dr. Rademaker mentioned, I myself would also agree with you that I'm the last person that should have technical difficulties. But for whatever reason, I'm just going to stick with the slogan that I have the face for radio. And so that's what we'll just work with today. But I promise if you'll invite me again, what I will do is I will be glad to make sure that our camera system's working. I'm actually, by way of, we have an office location in beautiful Solana Beach, California, which is just outside of San Diego. And then I'm currently in our Northwest Arkansas office in the great Ozark College town of Fayetteville, Arkansas. So I'd like to create that visual metaphor that behind me, right where I'm at, are a bunch of young college kids living life to the fullest, doing gosh knows what, while we're on here talking about helping other people. But just to paint that college town for you. But Dr. Rademaker, just by way of a brief executive summary about Feed is, Feed is a physician and dental brand agency. We were created based on, the challenges that physicians and dentists and other healthcare professionals have, which is connecting their authentic vision and their authentic voice in a way online and offline that cuts through the clutter of sounding like every other physician or every other dentist. And in fact, you and I were brought together, it's been about 10 years ago, based on this discussion, which is how can I be a physician maintain my professional credibility, compliance, but yet still have a unique voice that reaches patients in a more holistic way, in a more creative way than just the same medical jargon that's out there of symptomatic approach, et cetera. And so we have been fortunate enough to have received America's top healthcare brand agency with respect to creating that unique voice and helping physicians like yourself and perhaps others that are out there really take an inside out approach, because that's what branding is. Branding is a mental tattoo. It is a gut feeling or perception that we have towards a person or towards an organization. And all we do a great job of is really asking the right questions which allow you to internalize what makes you unique, both your unique voice and your purpose in your particular specialty. And then we give voice and words and pictures and images to that in a way that connects in a relevant way with patients.
So really what you're talking about is also, discovering or defining someone's identity, right?
That's correct. This is identity initially at its finest. And interesting enough, one of the biggest challenges that we run into in branding is working with somebody who does not know who they are. They don't know who they are individually, therefore they don't know who they are corporately. And if you don't know who you are and you can't answer why you do what you do, instead of the easier question, which is, what do you do? If you have the identity to know inside looking out why you do what you do in a purposeful way that connects with your gifts and your talents, and in your case, being a physician, treating people, one of the things that's so unique about your brand, for example, Dr. Rademaker, is that you recognize that identity is critical to treating the patient in a holistic and in a complete way. You can look beautiful on the outside, but not be beautiful on the inside. So, for example, as a board certified plastic surgeon, how can you connect the beauty that they feel inside with the beauty that, frankly, from a transformation standpoint, is easier for you to fix externally? So it's the same in branding. You show me a person who doesn't know who they are, and I will show you a person that cannot cut through the clutter of, their competition.
So how do you do that?
Well, we do it first and foremost through a discovery process. The discovery process consists of a set number of questions which allow us to kind of approach each particular client with questions that really challenge them to find out or declare their point of difference. Invariably, the process starts off like this. When I ask somebody, what do you feel is unique in the way that you practice medicine? Invariably, it'll start off with, well, we use the latest technology. We really care about our patients. And then rather flippantly, we go, compared to not caring about your patients and compared to using outdated technology. So very quickly, we're able to, in our case, in working with healthcare, but this applies to corporations outside of healthcare, we begin with a process that starts off rather strategically, but it's all emphasized on what's your unique difference, how one can think of how they're different. Because the thing about branding in this day and age, I'll give you an example. Branding in this modern age is defined as follows. Number one, branding is who you say you are. Branding is who your patients or your customers say that you are. And branding is who Google says that you are. And so you must be able to align those three to have a modern definition of branding. So when we take patients through that process, very quickly they realize that in this day and age, it's a bit counterintuitive to go through a process to help you realize how you're different, or better yet, unique, when everybody else is trying to declare how they're better. And how you're better is not a brand positioning that you can win. You will not win a brand positioning stating, we've got more experience, we've got more technology, we've got more intellect. You will not win that war amongst your competition. And let me give you an example. May I paint a visual metaphor for you since you can't see my face?
Right.
Okay. Here's a good one for you. For anybody who
And just by the way, Matthew, I'm very happy that we can't see you, because I get to just watch this beautiful face in front of me, Wendy. You're missing out, so I'm lucky. It's a little distracting sometimes, though. But go ahead.
Well, may I also say to you that I can see both you and Wendy. Wendy's on the left-hand side of the screen, and I do want to let you know that I haven't paid attention to you on the right-hand side of the screen once during this conversation. So I want to throw that disclaimer out, sir. All right.
What I might be able to do is maybe I'll just take me off the screen. Here you go.
No, you got to keep you on the screen for sure. But yeah, let me paint a visual illustration for you that I think will resonate with your listening audience. And in branding, I always start a presentation off this way. The way that I'll start it off is I will show a picture of Charles Lindbergh. And Charles is looking dapper. He's got the whole hair parted to the side. He's got the scarf. He's in the cockpit, of this plane. And the question that I ask people in a presentation is, who is the second person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean? Now, does anybody know who the second person is? Yeah, not typical, right? I mean, if we were in an auditorium and I asked you that question, you would kind of see their shoulders drop and go, oh, I get it. He's trying to make a point in branding that being first is what matters. And you're right. Being first in the hearts and minds of people is what matters in branding. Now, let me tell you a second illustration. If I had a PowerPoint slide in front of us, and that PowerPoint slide was a sea of X's. You can imagine this, right? A white PowerPoint slide. There is a ton of X's. And in the bottom right-hand third corner, I had an O. An O. And I asked the audience, what do you recognize about this slide? Every single time they will say, I see an O in a ton of X's. And I tell people, that's really what you need to know about the essence of branding, is that you must position yourself uniquely as first in the hearts and minds of people. And then number two, you must focus on being different instead of trying to prove that you're better. Do you think that was helpful?
Yeah. And the answer is Bert Hinkler.
Well, I may have seen you do the whole avert glance, type in Google, who's the second person to fly solo. But I don't want to, an intelligent man like yourself, I didn't want to bring that to anybody's attention.
All right. So, Wendy, are you up for a game?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Let's play a game.
How would you start with Wendy if you were to work with her branding? I know she's completely different than, she's not a doctor, but she could be one, I guess. What would you ask her about branding? And let's do a little experiment here. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Are you okay with this?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right, great. The first question that I would ask you is strong brands always have an interesting answer to the request, tell me about yourself. So my first question is, what's your interesting answer when somebody asks you, tell me about yourself?
Okay, well, I was born deaf and I do digital audio engineering.
See, that's interesting, right? I love that.
Yeah, that is very interesting. It's what makes me stand out. I was the guinea pig for Mayo Clinic, so that's another thing that makes me stand out. But what I did is I took what I was given and I just ran with it. So yeah.
See, here's what I really admire about your response, which is great, is that most people, well, first of all, it was brief, to the point, and memorable and interesting. Most people, as we probably know, we've all been there in the elevator pitch or the cocktail party, they will stroll down this. I was born in such and such. I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor, blah, blah, blah. And they start off with that storyline narrative. But I love how you just got straight to the point. It is interesting. I mean, I'm looking at you right now, and you're running an internet radio station, and you were born without the ability to hear, and how that is transforming to what you're doing now. Yeah. So you want to try another one?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So you knocked that one out of the park. So briefly share how you and your mission of Star Worldwide, how you're inspired by a sense of purpose.
Oh, definitely. Well, because I do work with Star Worldwide, I also have a show on Star Worldwide Networks called Independent Artist Radio. My whole show is dedicated to supporting the arts. I've teamed up with Alice Cooper, and I have the kids from his teen center come on to my show once the last Friday of every month. So I pay it forward by supporting the arts and supporting the teen center. And also I have somebody with a big name that really helps push it forward too.
Yeah, that's tremendous. Are you up for one more?
Okay.
All right, great.
Am I doing okay so far?
I got to tell you, Dr. Rademacher, we need to make sure that everybody knows that this was not staged. I mean, let's let everybody know that you had no idea that these questions were coming. Would we please confess that we had no idea?
I have no idea. I don't even know what you're going to say next. So
yeah, you don't, and that's what I love about it. So your answers are strong. So here's my next question. Now we in total, which we won't go through them. We've got 20 questions that vary from strategic to tactical. But here's another one, and I want to see if you can pick up why we ask this question to corporations, to brand individuals, etc., the way that we do. And here's the question: defining who you are and what your business stands for, it's powerful. Saying what you are not is really where you position your brand, both individually and collectively. So what are you not?
Ooh.
Now, I'm pretty sure that grammatically, I've got an F by asking the question, what are you not? Let's agree that grammar-wise is not my forte, but you get the gist of the question, right?
Mm-hmm. I get it. I'm not mainstream. I'm not run-of-the-mill. And that is a very good question, asking it that way, because everybody can always say what they are, but with saying what you are not, it really does set you apart. So I totally get why you asked that question. And yeah, by saying what you are not, it shows your uniqueness. So it's actually very good.
You are, first of all, I really respect your answer. And then I like how you picked up on, if, like you said, if I had asked this, who are you? Then it could have been a more basic question, but who are you not forces brands to kind of go down that list. And oftentimes we work with people, again, our biggest challenge is working with people who don't know who they are individually, corporately. And our job is to help them declare a point of difference that is meaningful and relevant and authentic. And you took the not element of that, and it exercises a different part of one's brain, right? We're shifting in these questions from, we're used to dealing with scientists, healthcare people. So we've got to shift them from left brain to right brain pretty quickly.
So one thing I noticed, Matthew, and this is very impressive, because you notice that she didn't hesitate even a second to answer your questions. You noticed that, right?
I did. It was great. I mean, what it tells me as a former psychological profiler back, in my misspent professional youth, is that you're very certain of yourself. You also have a high level of discernment. And discernment's interesting, right? Because discernment allows you to process, equally important, what you want to say versus I'm not going to say. You can switch from the why not to the why so very quickly. So absolutely.
So I want to spend a moment there, if you will. And, because you work with a lot of professionals in the medical field and the dental field. And I can imagine, right, that when you would ask them these questions, they would be floundering.
Yeah, it's you're accurate on that, Dr. Rademacher. They are floundering, but out of fairness, they flounder because no one's asked them really good questions which allow them to develop an honest and authentic answer. And what I like about,
Well, I have another thought about that one.
yeah,
And it relates to what you just shared with Wendy, is that she's very certain of herself, her uniqueness. If you were to look at her journey, her journey was one of many challenges. And so she had to, define herself and put the energy into, okay, this is who I am. This is who I am in the world. And the reason I brought up the question, because it's interesting, because when you look at all these doctors and all these dentists, most of them are really trying to fit in the mold. They're really trying to fit in with everyone else. And so they're just like everyone else. And so for many of them, I believe, and this is just my thinking, I could be totally off base, by the way, and I don't mind admitting that. It's just that everybody wants to be like everyone else. And so when you ask them that question, as you said, they're not used to this kind of question because they just want to be like everyone else.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And people have been trained, especially healthcare professionals that are in business. People are trained to default to, this is what I was taught. This is what I do better. And instead of thinking along the lines of, this is why I do what I do. Perfect example. I'm meeting with a neurosurgery practice out of New York City, 15 brain surgeons, literally. You can imagine the conversation of speaking to brain surgeons, completely left hemisphere. You've got a craniomaxillofacial background, Dr. Rademaker, so so you know where this is going. But they loved it. It was cathartic for them. And it was cathartic for them because once they understood that we were saying, listen, patients make decisions emotionally, not intellectually. And then we took them through the counterintuitiveness of branding is about your difference. They instantly got it. And they instantly began to see how easy it is to take a truthful perspective, process, procedure, and you're going to have this really unique protocol. We take people through a typical storyline narrative. And, my life's motto is, are you living a great story? That is my life's motto. That is my ethos for my life. Matthew, are you living a great story? So that's my personal ethos. And then extending that into branding, if you take people through a basic parameter of what makes up a great story, it's a boilerplate narrative. It goes something like this. Who are you? What's your challenge? What's the conflict resolution? Who's the guide in your life who stepped in and made a difference? What was the difference afterwards? It is Homer's Odyssey. It is a storytelling narrative that we all have a backstory. And in life and in business, if you can't articulate that you have challenges and you overcome those challenges, then you do not have an interesting story. And once I present that to people in that basic outline, people stop giving me canned answers and they start thinking of themselves as they're intersecting somewhere along the storyline narrative, which each of us uniquely has to tell.
Interesting. So here's a question for you then. So with the physicians or dentists that you've been working with, and with the character or the image or the identity of the practice that they had, through this process, have you ever changed somebody's direction, or has anybody ever totally changed their direction in their business because you've helped them, get absolutely aligned with who they really are?
And I'm going to say this not to impress you, but to impress upon you that it's almost impossible to go through this process and not finish in a different direction than when one started. Because again, imagine 20 great questions, which perhaps for the first time are directed to you to no longer think about how you're better, but how you're different in a unique and in a compelling way. Imagine how powerful that is, that you have no choice. It's taking you in a different direction. And so the honest answer, and this is why I love what I'm doing, is every day we meet with healthcare professionals. We're working with best-selling authors. I mean, working with people every day to just reframe their narrative so that it's authentic to their own interesting and memorable journey in a way that can't be copied. Because that's the beautiful thing, right? We all have our own set of experiences. We all have our own company. We don't have to make anything up. All we have to do is put words and voice and vision to what's unique about us internally and externally, and you've got a unique story.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because if I reflect to my own personal experience, which by the way is very different than most since I grew up in 5 different countries, but there's elements that's very similar to many other physicians. And when I was 13 years old, I made a very clear decision that I was going to be a doctor. And my environment and other influences really motivated and inspired me to continue on that path. But it's interesting when you put in so much energy in the very, very beginning to make this big decision, this life-changing decision, it's almost always likely that you kind of forget, what that process was, because the whole process to become a physician or a dentist is very long. I mean, I trained for 17 years before I was able to practice. And so you are bombarded with so much information, with so many obligations and responsibilities and challenges, commitments, that you really don't have a lot of time to absolutely reflect what it is that you're really doing. To kind of sort of think, what am I here for? As a surgery resident, I can't tell you how many times I was on call for 72 hours. In fact, there were times that I was in the operating room for 36 hours nonstop. That's 36 hours nonstop operating. And so there's not a lot of room left to be creative, to be thoughtful, to kind of, think about your life. But because of my background, I've always been an innovator. I've always looked outside. But I have to tell you that some of the work that you and I have done in the past really did help amplify. I mean, I was already going in the right direction, and I think you always recognize that. But with the work that we did together, you allowed me to amplify and make it even more magnificent than it was. So absolutely, you're absolutely right. With anyone, when you go through that process, it's going to change you. It's going to transform you. It's going to enhance who you are. And I'm very grateful for that, by the way.
Thank you. One of the things that you picked up is what we started with, which is people who understand or learn their identity, which is separate from the roles that we play in life, right? Completely different. If somebody says I'm a doctor, well, that's a role of them, but it's not who you are. It's not your identity. It's an occupation. It's one of your many roles. I'm a father. That's a role. So I find that with people will confuse their identity with their occupation. Do you guys find that to be true as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that when people identify themselves with their occupation, they can't help themselves. It becomes copycat marketing. So every lawyer, every doctor, every dentist, every entrepreneur, whatever, just displays what they learned before or in best practices, and it's never unique. It's just a commodity language. But, for example, Wendy, your uniqueness is a source or is an outlet of your identity, which frankly is bigger than you can go out and do anything you want entrepreneurial with that as a foundation. Your identity is who you are, and your entrepreneurial gifts and talents and all that. It's just a gift. It's a talent. It's a role that's there. And I think that most people don't think of their brand in that way. They just think of, help me to come up with something beautiful, help me to come up with something catchy in words and in vision, and then I'm going to dominate the market. And it's just not the case. I mean, aesthetics, and you know this well, Dr. Rademacher, aesthetics, both in the beauty sector, in we as people, and aesthetics in the web development or marketing, whatever, it does not make the person and it doesn't make the company without a strong sense of identity that provides that, both in form and in function. And that's what I always liked about your brand, is that very early on, I mean, gosh, Dr. Rademacher, this is 9 years ago. 9 years ago when you came up with this beauty integrity process and how that's connected, even the logo back then that you had with the encircling fingers representing completeness, wholeness, that's spot on. I mean, the ability for you to make someone beautiful is part of your training. It's part of that. But for you to help women and men connect beauty from the inside and out, that is unique. And that is much greater than look at my before. I wish that before and afters that we see in healthcare included an audio or a video of a person following that up with, this is how I look externally, but here's how I feel internally. That's what I want to hear.
Well, that's what I've done most of my testimonials, if you will, video testimonials. And I never used before and after pictures, but the testimonials where the people were just, sharing, their excitement. And just to qualify, just for the listeners, when Matthew talks about the inside, there's really two parts to that. And typically, when we talk about the inside, is your emotional and spiritual side or mental side. But for me, what's also very important is the physiological part. It's the body intelligence that we talk about, and that's how I was really introduced to Matthew originally. Is I don't always jump to a surgical solution immediately unless it's absolutely necessary. It's more like, what can we do physiologically? What can we give your body so that it's healthier and more rejuvenated on the inside? And obviously, when we impact the aesthetic side on the outside, it is actually going to influence the inside. It's very interesting, the whole study of silicone breast implants over the years. And we've actually identified that it almost seems like many of these women have less medical issues, less autoimmune disorders than women without the silicone implants. And my assumption, if you will, is that when you're happier about yourself, when you feel better about yourself, when you have that self-confidence, your body's just going to function a lot better. And, that's a conversation we can have, some other time. And Wendy, I mean, she has to be, on top of the world. I mean, you just look awesome. So you're a lucky girl.
Genetics. It's all genetics. Genetics and going boxing.
So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It's the inside, it's the outside, it's wanting to look. So a different question though, and the whole concept of branding. And what I'd like you to do is share a little bit more conceptually about branding, not so much, the zero between all the X's, but what are the emotions that you think that strong brands are creating? What is that key aspect? I mean, you look at Coca-Cola. I mean, that's almost like endless. And that's the only reason I drink Coca-Cola, because of the branding. So share a little bit about that part, that essence of what branding is.
Yeah, I mean, branding at its core is emotional, for sure. It's emotional because it connects people, moves people in a way that they want to take some form of action. That's why I always say that even in healthcare, most patients don't make their decisions of what healthcare provider they're going with intellectually. They make those decisions emotionally. And I think the reason why that is because, branding appeals to both the heart and the mind. And in order to move the heart into action, it's got to be something memorable that connects with people in a way that is above and beyond just a feature, but is a relevant and memorable benefit to them. I mean, we think all the time about attributes and traits of great brands. And if you could ask anybody, whether it's Apple or Coca-Cola or Red Bull, or, the list goes on and on and on. And you ask people to describe what is it about those brands that's memorable, they will always default to an emotional trigger. I can still remember the campaign. I thought it was so genius that Apple had, when this is back in the days before the iPhone, when it was just an iPod, and Apple just figured out, it's like, to say, the reason why you want to buy this is because it's like having 1,000 songs in your back pocket. I mean, how lovely is that? That it's kind of like, I get it. This is a credit card sized device. It's like having 1,000 songs, which I can listen to in my back pocket. So, branding is everything as it relates to emotion, but most people feel vulnerable when speaking emotionally and then using that to connect with their audience. It takes courage to be emotional / vulnerable, to either take a stance of humor or caring or whatever you're going for as the tone of this. Most people are afraid. And we have a joke in advertising. We say advertising is the price you pay for being boring. And and go figure, we're an ad agency. Yeah, we totally tell people, hey, we're an ad agency, but advertising is the price you pay for being boring. And everybody gets it whenever we say that.
Interesting. So are you telling me that people want, if they had a preference, they'd rather be unique versus like everyone else?
For sure. I mean, and everybody I know wants to be unique. They don't necessarily know how they're unique, but I mean, who doesn't want to be unique? And we tell people there's a difference between being different and unique. Different means different. Unique means being an N of one. And our goal is always to work with our clients and say, let's make it so that you're unique. You can't rip off or copycat uniqueness. You just can't. You can rip off, I see how this person is marketing themselves as different. But, I don't you believe that people, they may not feel unique, but we all have an innate sense of desiring to be unique.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I think Wendy for sure wants to be unique. I want to be unique for sure. I know that you want to be unique, Matthew. I just don't know if that's really true. I think so many people are worried about being left out or being different. I can't tell you how many arrows I get in my back because I am so different. But then I'm also uniquely different. How's that?
Yeah, I agree.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I think it's an honest answer. And, I just wish that, even as a father, so I'm a father of 3 beautiful, beautiful kids, 2 beautiful daughters, a 19-year-old son who's coming out your way, Dr. Rademaker, to go to college in Florida. And what I tried to learn early on as a father is, how wonderful would it be for my 2 beautiful daughters to understand how they're unique and how they have certain gifts and talents. And from that, they will attract other like-minded people who respect and value those differences. They don't have to, whether it's dating or whether it's friendship, they don't have to settle for less. They can connect with people that, and what's interesting is that, my daughters are dating different yet unique personalities from them. And I love that. I love the fact that, they're not looking for a clone of them. They're looking for somebody who is different and unique. And I mean, I've got a daughter who's married to a professional singer. I've got I love how my daughters are finding and attracting friends and, love relationships that are all people that are just as equally strong in who they are. And, even in my own marriage, I'm really fortunate that my parents and my wife's parents, they gave us the guidance of, part of a healthy marriage is you individually need to be strong in who you are so that you can be selfless and sacrificing and not be a let's great pain in the ass because you don't know who you are to trying to make somebody else happy. And I love that. I wish that we all had that guidance. So I know we're talking about relationships, but branding is about a relationship, right?
Absolutely. And so what's that feeling that people are looking to get? I mean, you talked earlier on, it's the emotion, but what are the emotions? I mean, when I look at the Coca-Cola as an example, and tell me if I'm wrong about this one, but this has been my personal view, is that I see all these young people having a lot of fun, and it's a community of young people that are adventurous and they belong together and they're having fun and they're living life. And so I get these different emotions of feeling good because I'm with other people and they are adventurous people, so to speak. I mean, they're living the life. And so, but different brands have different emotions that they inspire. And so when it comes to let's take doctors for a moment. What are those emotions that you feel are most significant? Is it the sense of trust? Is it a sense of certainty? Is it a sense of happiness? I mean, what are your thoughts on that one? And I'm going to ask Wendy's opinion too, by the way.
Yeah, in my experience, they are the things that move us to our core. They may make us cry, they may make us laugh, they may make us change our habits, they may make us courageous. I think that brand attributes are the same elements of we want to feel love, we want to feel respect, we want to be a part of a community, we want to be adventurous, all of those attributes, and we could just go down the list. If I said Apple, it would be innovation. If I said Red Bull, it would be adventure. If I said Volvo, it would be safety. I mean, we could just, kind of go down the list of that. And great brands that can be identified as, an action verb or a trait or something like that. But think of a great movie, think of a great song. All of those elements they touch us in some way. So why should our brand be any different? And so I just think personally, I think that most brands play it safe. They are afraid to take a stand for, being courageous because they think it's going to tip them over the edge, and people are going to think it's too polarizing. And we always tell people, a great brand is never inclusive. A great brand is exclusive. And there's a difference. Inclusive, anybody and everybody, come on in. Exclusive, not so much. Exclusive reaches a certain segment of people who identify with your unique message in a singular, polarizing way. And I think that most people have been taught from a young age, be open to everybody, mother may I, all of those things that we've been trained as a kid work against us when we are trying to establish a brand that is memorable and unique.
What's your favorite brand, Wendy? You have one?
My favorite brand? I don't know if I necessarily have one. I'm not a soda drinker. I'm not a fast food eater.
Is there a brand or something out there that really moves you?
That resonates with me. Okay, this is gonna sound kind of strange. I've worked as a brand ambassador for several companies. That's what I did before radio. Is I would represent different companies. So like when I worked for Chevy, I'd always have to wear, the Chevrolet uniform, and you had to look a certain way. You had to act a certain way. I did brand ambassadorship for Facebook. They took basically anybody who's any size, shape. It doesn't matter if you're, clean cut, if you're kind of punky. It doesn't matter because they wanted to be open. So from my perspective, because I've worked for branding for companies, I think my insight is slightly different because I was always hired for a certain way or to look a certain way or because I looked a certain way for that specific brand. Like I could never do bikini modeling or, the bikini brands where they have the girls showing bikinis. I don't fit that profile, but I do fit the profile when it comes to being very knowledgeable about products. So, so I think, so I see how different companies have different strong points, and I think it's wonderful that they recognize it. But it's interesting to see how they put it out there without having quote unquote commercials, just having people represent the companies. It's quite unusual.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I actually answered your question. I went off on a tangent. I apologize.
Perfect answer, by the way.
Thank you.
So we have a few more minutes left, and I just want your perspective on this thing that I'm going to share with you. When high school graduates, by the time they graduate high school, they've been exposed to, I think the number is 250,000 commercials in their lifetime. And so clearly, branding and advertising has a very significant impact in what we learn as kids. And so it's then interesting when you see certain kinds of brands really take advantage of that and really influence perhaps the narrative, kind of what you just suggested earlier on, Matthew, as to what people should think and feel. And I think that's inauthentic. And it's somebody's point of view on life, their philosophy on life, their view on life that's saying, well, my view is better, so you must have this. How often, and then maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, Matthew, but you're the expert. How often do you think that actually happens?
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion on that, and I sleep soundly at night. Being a brand guy, it bothers me zero in the following way. I believe that you cannot sell anything to somebody who doesn't want what you have. I truly believe that people love to buy things, but they hate to be sold to. So for me personally, I have a clean conscience. When I represent brands that I believe in, and I'm part of that messaging, that imprint, I don't worry one bit about somebody buying that product or not, because they're buying it. And I think that being sold to, quote unquote, is highly overrated. Whenever I hear somebody say to me, I closed these deals, I sold this, what we're really saying is that what you have to offer is a fit for the other person in a way that they're going to pay you money. So for me personally, I do think that messaging resonates. I think that messaging shapes perception. I totally believe that. But and you had mentioned kids, so and having kids myself, I want to be sensitive to that. I do think that there is negative advertising that is shaping our kids, etc. But I do think that of adult age, most people, including myself, we hate being sold to, but we love to buy stuff. And that's how I view it.
Yeah, I would certainly agree, except that it's just interesting when, with this very interesting political year that we've had,
Yeah.
everything else. I just think it's interesting how some of the Super Bowl commercials were very much politically tinted. And the impact that it had on me previously, there was one ad, which is Audi. And I was seriously considering getting an Audi. I love German cars. I love BMWs. and I've always had BMWs or Range Rovers. I mean, those create different emotions inside of me. And I thought to myself, well, let me go ahead and let me start thinking about an Audi. By the way, I'm not in the market now, so I'm not going to buy it anyhow. But I was thinking about it. I saw the commercial. I says, nope, I'm not doing it, because I thought it was completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfair. I think that's a misuse and abuse, because granted, I have the ability to see through that, and no criticism of everyone else and many other people. I've been very blessed, very fortunate with all of the background and having the brain cells to process things, but some people can't. And then they're just very much easily influenced. We know that marketing is so powerful, and how it so strongly influences these things. And so the same thing, being in the beauty industry, there's, women, in my opinion, are very, very vulnerable to this beauty industry, and in all ways. And some of the commercials out there, I think, was it Dove was doing this whole commercial series.
I love that commercial.
Mm-hmm.
I love the commercial from the perspective of it shows what beauty can be. But then again, it's also changed the narrative, which says, which in my opinion says, well, maybe you shouldn't focus so much on beauty. The truth is that in my experience, whatever it is that you believe in, as far as how you look, just needs to be, how should I put it, nurtured in an honest way. And so if you really want to, go way out and get surgery done and everything else, then great, as long as it's done sensibly. But there's so much criticism of that. But anyhow, that's another conversation for another day, because I got the finger. That was the index finger, by the way.
It was this finger, not the other one.
So, but that's definitely a conversation that'd be fun to have in the future, Wendy, about, aesthetics and beauty and branding and all that kind of stuff. So anyhow, Matthew, thank you so much for a very enlightening conversation. Very quickly, in 10 seconds, how can people find you?
People can find me at feedtheagency.com.
Great. My friend, thank you for joining me today. And I am Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation. Real people, real conversations, real solutions. A platform where you can hear the authentic voices of others so that they can transform your life. Wendy, you look gorgeous today, and thank you.
Thank you.